The following is a special presentation of the PDF Sports Network.
What up? Way too early with Pat. We are back in New York. Yes, indeed. It's been a while. And you see my daughter is way too active. So nonetheless, we're gonna, as we always do, tap in with everybody. Good morning, good morning. I got the whiteboard ready to roll. So we are back at it. Fully back to interactive status too. So if you want to tap in, please let me know. I'm going to be going over today the rankings and some of the conversations going on about committees and such, and how we got to these the rankings, the Sunshine Bowl rankings, the latest version. I know that some of you might be sick of this conversation, and I know some of my buddies are going to be like, oh, why are we still talking about this? But remember, we never spoke about it on Way Too Early with Pat, so we got to let everybody else tap in and give their 2 pennies on it as soon as I get up and running here. So a few disclaimers, if you will. So because I know that there's been a, hey, what up, Hunch? Because I know there's been feelings, so many feelings about this. So I'm going to be just purely and simply asking some questions. And if you can't figure out an answer, then maybe you need to do some introspection or what have you. I'm also going to say it in a very productive way. And for anything that, oh, this is just not working. Anything that's just not really capable of, oh, there it is. Capable of occurring. I'm capable of being online on this thing so I can reload this page. If it's not capable of happening, I'll say, hey, look, I don't think it's capable of happening. If people are doing the best that they can, I'm going to give them the credit for doing the best that they can. So I did have a couple of discussions beforehand. I had discussions with Crow. I had discussions with Duncan, to name a few. So what I'm about to say, I've already told them. So if you're like, oh, they already know. So I'm going to preface it by saying that. So right now, for some reason, my iPad is not iPadding. So I'm going to computer it because we're just being really difficult this morning. You know, go figure, all this time on the road, no issue whatsoever. And then now I'm back to home base. And when I'm back to home base, now it wants to act up. Go figure. What up, what up, what up? So for the Bleezy page, it's just moving real slow today. But I want to get to it. Groups. What's up, Player Lounge? Players Lounge, what's up, what's up? I think I'm just going to have to reload this one. Cool. And then for my, what up? So I'm going to give you the numbers specifically because there was a live on my drive home one time where I was trying to do specific quoting because I want to give the numbers because the numbers kind of tell the story. And the numbers tell the story of the first point that I want to make, which is whatever it is that is done is not done in a malicious way. I don't think anybody's plotting your demise regardless of what team you're on. So let me get that part out of the way. There's nobody plotting your demise. There's nobody sitting there like, you know what, they play really good football, but we just don't want to give them credit. I don't think it is anything remotely close to that. What I will say is that there are ways that show that there's obvious bias, okay, and an inability to kind of see bigger picture. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's still not malicious. People have biases, and there's nothing wrong with their biases. But to pretend like there are no biases when clearly there is, totally different story. Sorry it's taking me so long to just tap everybody in and then get started. Let me just make sure that I'm sharing to all the groups. And meanwhile, we'll get started. What up, EFA? What up, Big East? This is taking forever. That's what's up. See, I got my Real Madrid shirt on today. My representing Puerto Rico hat. Finally got back on Thursday night after being stuck, stranded, whatever you want to call it, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Again, there's a lot worse places you could be stranded than Puerto Rico, so I can't really... What am I doing? I'm not doing that. Cool. ACFA, what's up? And then everybody else, ACFA, I want to tap those guys in too, because otherwise you're going to catch it on the replay. Hey, what up, what up? And I don't want you catching it on the replay. If you have something to say, I definitely want to see it in the comments. And then take it from there. Cool. Top of the morning. Oh, appreciate it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, so let's get started, shall we? So the other thing that I want to make sure that we're clear on is I'm going to go over the committee process, right? Because first things first, Crow, big shout out to my guy Crow. He does such a great job. It is a ton of work. So I'm not going to sit here and not give that man his recognition first and foremost and say thank you for everything that you do, because without you, it definitely would not be nearly as fun. So with that being said, it's often a thankless job. And for those of you that want to blame Crow for everything, Crow is usually the one that stands up and takes the arrows. Oh, here it is. Now I'm good. Go figure. Crow is the one that usually stands up and takes the slings and arrows and such. And he has a committee, and the committee is the one that, sorry if I shared it twice, but you'll get over it. The committee is the one that makes the decisions. It is not his decision solely. So I want to also acknowledge that I don't know who's on the committee. Some people have chosen to say that they're on the committee, and they'll defend their selections and such, which is awesome, by the way, and big respect to those guys. If they say that they're on the committee, PA, what's up? I'm tapping everybody, and that's why I'm sitting here BSing for this time, trying to cover up space. New Jersey, what up? There's a lot of pages. MLF, ACFA, and boom. Okay, cool. All right, we're locked in now. What rankings are you talking about? Oh, I'm talking about the Sunshine Bowl rankings. So I want to talk apples to apples. So Sunshine Bowl, and the reason why Sunshine Bowl is getting the attention it's getting is because New York, which is where I'm based out of, and the Bleezys are based out of, we don't support USA Bowl. USA Bowl did not have the Knowles even ranked at all. Whatever it is that their parameters are, I don't think you could say that you're about the best if you don't even acknowledge one of the best teams in the country, let alone the best team in the country. However, we don't support USA Bowl. So why would we even speak about them? We know their flaws. We've gone ad nauseum talking about the flaws with that, 100%. The other one is the NFE. The NFE showed themselves with the experience that the Knowles and the Bombers had down in Florida with their referee debacle, and the referee that essentially ended the game early was hired the next day to referee games and such. And their shortcomings. I was going to use a much more harsh term, but I'll reserve that for now. But the way that they do business has been chronicled, so I don't think New Yorkers are really messing with them much. And by the way, historically, New Yorkers have messed with the Sunshine Bowl more than any of the other two. That's not just the Seminoles, Gators, Bandits, even golly, there's a few more. So New York representatives, Sharks, or New York, New Jersey metro area have always, for a long time, have supported the Sunshine Bowl and have supported the Sunshine Bowl and its rankings as the go-to for a number of years. So that's why we're giving it so much attention, not because we think that they did a bad job or worse than anybody else, but because that's the one that we support. So with that support comes a little bit of critiquing. So let's talk about this. One of the one thing that I really wanted to point out as to the issue that I had with the rankings or the Sunshine Bowl process, if you will, because I'm not going to nitpick over 2-1 or 3-2 or whatever, is the advocacy part. So for a number of years, I've asked two questions of the Sunshine Bowl, because the Sunshine Bowl is the only ones that respond. I've asked the same question of the NFE, but it kind of yes, man, just name New York City, man, teams upstate. There is no difference. Gotcha. For a number of years. I've been asking two questions. One, who sits on the committee to rank these teams? How much football are they watching? How qualified are they to compare one region to another? And then the second thing is I guess it's the same thing as the first, which is how are the teams ranked AAA versus AA? What's that process or what have you? Which we've seen is open to discussion and open to modifications. Big shout out to Crow. So one of the things I respect about Crow is that he stands up in front of everybody and takes a stand and says, "Hey, look, this is our process. I'll listen to suggestions and we'll kind of work it from there." He never says flat out, "No, I'm doing it this way." Blah blah blah. He is open to suggestions as long as those suggestions are well thought out and not based on feelings. Because one thing Crow is definitely will definitely turn Crow's ears off is people talking about their feelings. So let's go straight. Let's go straight to off of feelings and let's go to facts, right? So the fact is, there's got to be some type of qualifications for people to sit on this committee, right? Now, with that being said, how likely are we to find people that have these qualifications? So we might have a wish list, and my wish list goes as follows, right? Not to say that we absolutely have to do this, because I don't think we can find people that are truly qualified to sit on a real deal committee that would be completely perfect, right? So I think that Crow has it more perfect than most people do. Let me say that again, so that when Crow tries to go at me, I remind him I said this. Crow has it done the best that is being done, period. He's the best at doing it. I'm not throwing out great for perfection by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just breaking it down for you. So how likely are we to find people with these qualifications? Now, the qualifications that I'm putting out there is to not have affiliations with teams, to not have affiliations with leagues, which in itself, where does the Bombers play? The Bombers play last year they played in the NEFL. I did that breakdown 2 weeks ago, by the way, about the teams that they beat ended up either dropping down to AA or not existing. But make sure you go back, spin the block on that one. The last time I was in New York, which feels like a month ago. Nonetheless, find people that don't have affiliations. That in itself eliminates a lot of the most knowledgeable people in semi-pro. Unfortunately, most of the people that come into semi-pro come in with affiliation with a team or a league and have some type of inherent bias. The Bombers play out of Massachusetts. The fact that you cannot find people that are knowledgeable that don't have affiliations is kind of like the cornerstone of the issues that people have in terms of when the rankings are not the way that they picture it or what have you. Most people have a limited info because the ones that enter semi-pro watch their particular team or their particular league, and very few times, especially when leagues are running at the same time or together at the same time of year, are going to take time away from what they're doing with their product and watch somebody else's product. Which is why this past year, being that I was retired myself, going to various leagues games, especially driving out to Reading and seeing an NEAFL game. I've seen NEFL games. I've seen ECFL games. I've seen Big East games. I've seen TFL games. I've seen IFA games. I've seen, my goodness, the run the gamut. And those are only the leagues that are relatively recent. With that being said, to be able to have somebody not affiliated. Oh, thank you. To have somebody not affiliated but still knowledgeable and able to compare different leagues is rare. There's only one person that I know of legitimately that has it done now, which is going to be the topic of a lot of my conversation. Big shout out, Duncan. So David Dawu Duncan, he watches games, he attends national championship games, bowl games, where he sees on the field in person, which I've been saying for months, by the way, that the more that you see in person, the more qualified you are to say that one team is better than the other with honesty, right? And it's going to get me to part 2 of what I'm going to talk about today, which is Mr. Duncan. I'm going to talk about him, but it's okay because I told him exactly what I was going to say, so there should be no surprises. So if he wants to fight me, I'll meet you, no worries. Just make sure it's in warm weather. I'm heading to Miami in a few weeks. We definitely got to get together and get some cigars and such. But nonetheless, so what role do you have? So if I even forego, like we're not going to find unaffiliated, let's say 10 members that are unaffiliated with any league or team who are completely free of bias. What role do they play? Are they a coach? Are they a player? Or are they an admin? So there are some people that serve as admin that do not know what they're looking at on a football field, period. And they might attend the most football games out of everybody. But when they're at those football games, it might be collecting money at the gate. They could be, on the sidelines, just making sure people don't fight or argue with one another. They could just be there because whatever it is that they do during the week, they got nothing to do on the weekend, and most of their duties are based in what's going on during the course of the week in terms of league business, right? But on the weekend, they're just there hanging out, watching the game for entertainment. They're not watching it for any deeper meaning or analysis or what have you. So just because you're an admin or just because you're around the game more often in terms of minutes or time spent watching the game doesn't mean that you know what on earth you were looking at. The way that you look at it as a coach versus a player is very, very different, right? So I think for a committee to be better, again, and keep in mind, I don't know who's on the Sunshine Bowl committee. So I can't say that for sure that they got it wrong and this is the reason why they got it wrong. I'm just going to tell you my thought process on what would make the best committee and then kind of take it from there. And Crow might be the closest he can possibly be to finding those people, right? So the next part is after they spend time, but they may not know what they're looking at, but the comparisons, how likely are they to be able to unbiased compare one league to another league, to compare team to team, right? And then with that, are they able to, because not everybody can do this, get the old pad and pen like I'm about to do, and really do a breakdown and analysis of, okay, who, if we're not going to get a team on the field, how can I likely say that one team is, you can't even say definitively, but how can I say that one team is better than the other, or I'm pretty confident that one team is better than another, if those teams haven't competed directly on the field against one another, if they're not in the same league. So that requires a little bit of analysis, a little bit of hypotheticals, which include, what common opponents they have, and those common opponents going to common opponents, and maybe third or fourth generations on the tree, and breaking down, well, this team beat this team, but that team lost to that team, and that team lost to that team beat that team, and that's the connection, I forgot it's the sixth sense, not the sixth sense, whatever it is, the 6 degrees or 7 degrees of separation type of thing. So it does take a little bit of analysis to try to get it as accurate as you can. Does that mean that on a given Sunday that number 15 can't beat number 5? Absolutely not. But when you talk about a ranking system, which gives everybody the due respect, and you want to give them their due respect, even in the rankings that I come out with, I want to give everybody their due respect. So when somebody disagrees with my rankings, I don't sit there and just go, well, that's the way I feel. I say, well, what makes you believe that you're higher than this team? And then I explain my thought process and the commonalities and such, and go down on the flow chart. And if you still disagree with me, then we just have a disagreement. And if you at that particular point are stuck like, well, I just feel, then I declared victory, and then we're moving on with the thing. So that is the nature of committees. And we have a shortage of that nationally. So let me go to the fact that the closest one, the one that advocates best for their particular region. And I've been into meetings with the I-95 Classic where people from different regions have been arguing and advocating on behalf of their region. So I know how these type of conversations, how these conversations play themselves out, right? So each region is sitting there talking about how their region has let's say 1 through 3, right? So let me go to the board real quick so I'm not backwards on this thing, right? Boom. Cool. All right. So let's say you have Northeast, South, Midwest. All right. So let's just deal with 3 regions for now, right? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3, right? So I'm not even going to put names of teams in, right? But the question ends up being, right, if the first conversation is out of the Midwest, South, and Northeast, who's number 1, right? So if let me move back a little bit. There we go. So if I move back a little bit, and I'm going to do overall, right? And this is the trickiest part of it, right? So overall, I'm trying to get, let's say, a top 4, right? Northeast has a number 1 team. Morning. South has a number 1 team. Midwest has a number 1 team. Got it. So now these 3 regions argue over who's number 1 between their top teams, gives their resumes, boom, boom, boom. So let's say overall the Midwest, and it's usually Duncan arguing on behalf of the Midwest, and I've seen that man argue, and he is knowledgeable. He's when I go over the checklist of him actually going to other games and being able to speak on things, he is the most effective in doing it. So when it comes down to it, when Duncan takes his team and talks about his team compared to the South's number 1 and the Northeast number 1, he is effective in being able to say, well, I've seen the Northeast number 1. I've seen the South's number 1, and I'm telling you, I've seen them in person. My number 1 is better than than those guys. And then he is very dynamic and able to talk about his particular team. So I'm talking about process. Sean Kelman. That's what the people want. See, stop going against the people. That's what the people want. And by the way, you talking about that, where's Black's barbecue? It's warm outside. I ain't got no barbecue, so I ain't trying to hear it. So now the South and the Northeast, they sit there and argue about who's number 1 between the 2 of them. So then let's call that let's say the Northeast wins that one, and then the South is regulated to number 3. Now here's the thing, right? And you might already see an issue, right? When it comes to number 1s, those are usually those undefeated teams. But then when you go to number 2, these number 2s being put in a position to be ranked number 4 overall, then what happens again? Does the Midwest get it by default? Well, their number 2 might not be nearly as good as the South's number 2. Or the Northeast number 2 might not be nearly as good as the Midwest number 2. And what happened with the Midwest in the rankings is something that you didn't really pay attention to. You didn't pay attention to it. And I'm going to highlight it today, which is the very interesting part, which is going to absolutely make you go, All right. So now here's the thing. We have a situation where the Midwest number 3, right? And the Midwest number 2, the 2 and 3 might be better than this 2 or this 2. So now as you're populating it, some people think, well, if I'm looking at the Northeast rankings, the Northeast ranking number 2 team might end up being overall number 10. Whereas the number 2 team in the Midwest might be overall number 4. And that's where people start losing their minds. And justifiably so. Because we didn't see the regional rankings, right? So here's the thing. I'm absolutely going to come over the pause. I'm absolutely going to release my rankings and be done on the subject. And this is the process that I'm getting to that, by the way. So give me a second and I will go over my particular process. And if you disagree with me, cool, you're wrong, but you can disagree with me, right? So this is the challenging part. The challenging part is the number 3 over here might be a very competitive. So 2 and 3 might be like 2 and 2A. So that's where there will always be somebody complaining because of that logjam. Everybody's number 1 is usually the simplest conversation. I said pause, right? That's usually the simplest conversation. But when we fill out and go over resumes, then that's a totally different thing, right? So now I'm going to erase this really quickly. And then I'm going to go into what particularly happened with the Sunshine Bowl rankings. And by the way, Coach Black, I was going over solutions. So I'm not just complaining. I'm not really complaining anymore. So now, when I'm looking at, and let's do this on the computer so you're not taking my word for it, right? When you look at the Sunshine Bowl rankings from the last ranking that came out before the Sunshine Bowl game, this is why people were like, right? See all photos. Let me see if I can pull up this ranking. Beautiful. This is from, here it is. Beautiful. This is from January 4th. So at this particular point, the Seminoles had not played in the NFE championship game yet. Neither of the 3 national championship games have been played because Oklahoma City is here at 12-0 still, right? So now, when you look at the rankings, the last ranking that the committee came out with, whoever is on the committee, again, I don't know who's on the committee, but this is what the committee said on January 4th. The committee said on January 4th that the Ravens were the top team in the land and the Seminoles were number 2. And we were not going to get that 1 versus 2 matchup. Now, this is, keep in mind, Sunshine Bowl rankings. This is all apples to apples. This is not NFE rankings. I know in previous times I compared the USA Bowl rankings to the NFE rankings, and this is not it. We're going strictly Sunshine Bowl rankings to talk about committees and what the thought process of committees are, right? So you have the Detroit Ravens at number 1, the Seminoles at number 2, the Fayetteville Ducks at number 3. And again, that's the big thing that you're going to eventually pay attention to because the Seminoles are ranked higher than the Ducks as of January the 4th. With their body of work, January 4th, that's the ranking. The number 4 team is the Bombers, number 5 team is the Sharks, number 6 is the Lockport Wildcats, who the Seminoles gave their only loss to. See where I'm going with this? Now, when you're looking at this, here's the thing. The decisions, which were talked about, and Tony was talking about this when he posted these rankings, so let me just clarify, because I believe this is the point that he made as well, is that who the Ravens decided to play, they decided to take on the number 7 team. So the only thing that they can add to their resume at this point is a win over the number 7 team. The number 2 team decided to play the number 4 team, the highest available other than the Ducks. And keep in mind, we're not comparing the Noles, when this is all said and done, to anybody other than the Ducks. So the Ducks could not play anybody higher than the Noles. Are we seeing this? So the Ducks took the Sharks, the number 5 team. So 2 is playing 4 and 3 is playing 5. So what could possibly transpire to make 3 leapfrog number 2, which was the premise of my argument and what I disagreed with? Because in order for 3 to jump over 2, number 3's victory has to be very impressive. And number 2 either has to lose or to get by the skin of their teeth. And that's not what happened. So keep in mind, in addition to all that, number 2 has already beaten number 5. So number 3 can't even beat a team that beat number 2. They can only beat a team that number 2 is already beaten. So there is no scenario in which 3 can overtake 2. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me what you see, because that's what I'm seeing. The Sunshine Bowl had the Bombers as of January 4th. The Bombers were number 4, not 11. This is before everybody played their championship game. All right? So where they go after that, again, that's the scenario. So the Ravens, so 1 plays 7, 2 plays 4, and 3 plays 5. So I totally disagree with what Crow said the other day. Again, he does an amazing job. Appreciate you. I disagree with what Crow said about you had to play a better game. Yeah, you played a regional game. You played what the rankings said was the best available. You played a better team than what the team that leapfrogged you played. You did. Right? So now, and let me do it this way so you can see what it turned into, right? Is everybody following me? 2 didn't finish the Natty game. That game was finished. Number 2, the fact that you are speculating over the game not finishing when the team was definitively ahead, and on top of it, the team that they were beating had just lost their starting quarterback, it was going to get worse, right? So if you're talking about watching football, nobody's going to sit there and say the Seminoles were not definitively better than the Bombers, and it wasn't even close, right? Technicality, they didn't finish. Got it. By whose fault? It wasn't the Noles that quit. Yes, it wasn't the Noles that quit. It wasn't the Bombers that quit. But can you make the statement that the Noles are definitively better than the Bombers? If you can make that statement, then we go back to the rankings. If you're trying to tell me, 2-4, if you're trying to tell me that the Noles are not definitively better than the Bombers, I'm going to say that you're crazy. After the sample size that we had. It didn't have to be that big of a sample size, but after the sample size that we had, new. So now, I showed you again, number 1 played number 7, number 2 played number 4, and number 3 played number 5, right? And I get it, you're not blaming your team. All I'm saying is that regardless, the Noles are better. Gotcha. So what happened as a result of those results? That was kind of repetitive, right? So now I'm going to put the 2 rankings next to one another, and this is where it gets a little hinky, right? And with this festive stuff, I need to lower this a little bit. Boom. All right, so let's put them As close together as possible, right? There we go. Cool. All right. So now, 1 played 7, 2 played 4, 3 played 5. So 1, 2, and 3 won. All with wins, right? So if 1, 2, and 3 won, then the only way that 1, 2, and 3 don't stay 1, 2, and 3 is if something crazy happened, right? So let's take that unfinished game. I appreciate that. You should always defend your brothers. But let's go logic here. So we were talking about the Bombers, okay? So the Bombers, you're telling me that the Seminoles didn't do enough to overtake the Ravens. And I would tend to agree with you. I thought that if the Sharks had handled the Ducks, that would boost the Seminoles over the Ravens. Because at that point, as I said in prior lives, they have more wins in the top 20 than anybody, more so than the Ravens. And the Ravens played a very difficult schedule. They had the hardest schedule out of everybody. Got to give them that, 100%. But here's the thing. If you're saying that the Noles not finishing the game didn't do anything, so it's basically like a clouded, like we really don't know who's better, it's almost like the game had never happened, then how on earth did the Bombers go from 4 all the way to 11? So the impression that game had dropped the Bombers from 4 to 11. So you can't say that game was in doubt. You can't say that the game didn't have an impact on the committee, because the game had such an impact on the committee that they dropped the losing team from 4 to 11. Now, what do you have to compare that to? Okay, the Ducks ended up beating the Sharks. Very ugly game. Let's talk about the impact. For the Ducks, the impact was so great that the Ducks leapfrogged the number 3 team, who, when you look at their resume, even with the record over here, 11-1 CCN, 11-1 CN. So you're like, well, this has an extra C in it. They're both 11-1. How does this end up flip-flopping? Since the team with the CCN is now lower than the team with the CN, and prior to this week was ranked higher. That's where you lose me. That's where it doesn't make sense. So for the Ducks, that win was so impressive, it leapfrogged them over the Noles. The impact on the Sharks go from 5 to 7. So obviously there wasn't a dismantling, because if the Ducks had dismantled the Sharks or really showed up the Sharks or destroyed the Sharks would have dropped like a weight. They would have dropped down to double digits. They didn't do that. They dropped to 7. And by the way, the same Sharks team that the Noles beat. So that's where you lose me on that. Number 1 ends up beating number 7. Number 7, the team that we were all like, they don't really belong. They're undefeated in a national championship game. There's 6 slots for nationals. Right? There's six spots to win a national championship. 2 in the USA Bowl, 2 in the NFE, and then 2 in the Sunshine Bowl. 6 spots. Oklahoma City is number 7 according to the Sunshine Bowl. So out of everybody that played for the national championship, they were the lowest team out of anybody to play for a national championship. They go from 7, they get completely dismantled. They go from 7 to 10, which I'm not incredibly mad at, because who did they lose to? The number 1 team in the nation. And if you're 7 playing number 1, there's distance between you two. I don't think it should be 30 points. And I think Oklahoma City kind of got exposed, even more so than we already thought. But that's the bottom line. 1 played 7 and held the number 1 spot. 7 dropped to 10. 2 played 4 beat them soundly. We're beating them soundly. Let me correct myself. So much so that 4 dropped to 11. In fact, dropped so much that they dropped further down than a team that lost by 30 points in the Oklahoma City Bears. So the Bears are actually higher than the Bombers. In fact, Lockport, Jersey Sharks, 2 teams that the Seminoles beat, are ranked higher than the Bears in the finale. So that's where it gets tricky. Please chime in. Tell me what I'm missing. 3 played 5. And as a result, moved up to 2, and 5 dropped to 7. That's where you lose me. Now, here's the thing. And this is what's going to go tie my conversation back to the committee part. So that's what happened, right? So as I told you, let me not say something's wrong with the committee. The New York representation in the committee is not working. Whoever it is, I don't know who it is, but whoever it is, they are not working. Because if they couldn't point that out and get the people in that room to just immediately toss out that move, they don't have any business in that seat, whoever they are. And again, I don't know who they are. But I bet that they don't watch a lot of football. And I would bet that they don't watch a lot of different leagues and have branched out to be able to say, well, I've seen this particular team. I've seen that particular team. I've seen this particular league. I've seen that particular league in person. But you know who can say that? Duncan. Duncan advocates better than whoever the New York rep is. And that much is obvious. And this is what my conversation with him the other day was. Again, he didn't like it, but can't say it's not true. Which is, he advocated for the Midwest so much, like not just his league, but you can see it in the rankings that the Midwest is higher altogether than everybody else. So you remember how I came up with, remember how I came up with the scenario of, hey, look, you know, you're the number 2s and Midwest number 2 versus Northeast number 2. Check this out. Here's part of I'm going to say problem. This is an interesting part, right? Now, when you look at this thing, do I have like ketchup on my thing? That's crazy. Anyway, let's take a look at this thing for a second. Let's look at where the Midwest is. Midwest has the number 1 team in the nation. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that Detroit didn't have the best team. They did have the best team. They had the toughest record. Even with 1 loss, they were better than a lot of teams that were undefeated. Got to give that to them. So Duncan absolutely couldn't have screwed that one up. Ravens are number 1. Got it. But now look at their number 2 in terms of PFA, right? So PFA is number 1. The next PFA team is number 13. Now, you're used to seeing this team, the Racine Raiders, and not many people are going to argue with it because of their name in previous years. But their number 2 team in the PFA is a 10-4 runner-up team that's ranked number 13. PFA 10-4. A 10-4 team. They are, and this is where the advocacy comes in. Again, I'm not saying cheating. I'm not saying underhanded. I'm not saying anything other than advocacy, because he convinced a committee that the number 13 team in the land is a 4-loss team. The only other 4-loss team that appears on this thing is in the MLF at 7-4. And you know the MLF, that would be Crow's League. Again, not saying anything other than that. Crow is going to advocate, let's use that word, is going to advocate for his guy. He's knowledgeable. Crow watches more football than most people do. So don't get it twisted. So I'm not going to sit there like, oh, they cheated, they choose their teams. No. How are you going to sit there in a meeting with these guys and they sit there and say, no, I've seen your team. Boom, 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 boom. This is why this team is higher. How are you going to hang with that? Who in New York is going to hang with that? Right? So the number 13 team, Racine Raiders, the Racine Raiders. Come on, boy, the Racine Raiders. You know, 15 years ago, they did this. 20 years ago, they did that. Blah, 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 blah. And basically the whole room, yeah. You can't refute that. Well, if you don't do your due diligence and you don't advocate properly, then you're gonna end up with that. So the number 13 team in the number 2 team in the PFA is a 10-4 runner-up. But then 2 spots later, the number 15 team is the Motor City Rams. They were 10-1. Racine upset them to go to the championship. Motor City is up there, duly noted, because they beat the Ravens. But now you have 3 teams from the PFA in the top 15. That's advocacy right there. And who's going to argue that? I think I could have argued Racine out of there. Who's your number 2 team? Is Racine better than the Rams? Well, look who Racine lost to. So if you have a head-to-head between Racine and the Rams ended up at 10-1, and Racine ended up at 10-4. Nah, bro, you gotta make a decision. There ain't no way that your number 3 is gonna be higher than my number 2. Your 2 and 3 are higher than my 2. Nah. And then on top of it, who can? Oh, you know what, Pat? Well, look, Pat. Columbus, Ohio Fire, PAFL, 10-1, champion at number 5. Illinois Cowboys, MW. Guess what MW stands for? 12-3, champion. Now, when you talk about the Midwest, they have the number, not just the PFA, but the Midwest. Midwest has the 1, the 4, the 5, the 6. Oklahoma City's not really the Midwest, but team that they played was Midwest, right? Number 13, number 15, number 16. The Midwest is all over the rankings because their person advocates. They're knowledgeable. They speak on it. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? So even if it's not PFA, brush up on your geography skills a little bit, especially because Duncan puts his teams against the teams in these other leagues. So he can say, hey, my team hung with this team, and that team played the Cowboys, and this is how close they were to the Cowboys. He makes those connections. He knows about the Columbus Fire, even though the Columbus Fire are not in his league. He knows about Sheboygan in and out, even though they're not in his league. He knows about the Midwest. He has a PhD in Midwest semi-pro football. And that conversation, I can hear it now. He does his due diligence. And that's why, that's how he's able to advocate for his teams. And meanwhile, if it wasn't for the fact that the Jersey Sharks were in the MLF, where Crow, again, not saying dirty, not saying cheating with it, Crow could talk about the Jersey Sharks. They were in his league. He could advocate for them. So whoever the New York or our Northeast rep was, didn't even have to do the job when it came to the Sharks. The Sharks are in the MLF. And the same dude that runs the MLF runs the Sunshine Bowls. That's an easy assignment. So I'm not even going to pay no attention to the fact that the Sharks are 7, right? So Seminoles are 3. The runner-up in LAL is 12. I'm sorry, the runner-up in LAL is 17th, right? Do you see any other LAL team? Do you see the Pharaohs? Are the Pharaohs a top 20 team in the nation? Right? You have a lot of R's here, runner-ups. Right? R's instead of C's? Yeah, no. B's instead of N's. N means that you're national. You won at nationals. B means that you got into a bowl game. I believe that means you lost a bowl game too, right? But when you look at this. Capital City's from DMV, right? And Kansas City, yeah. So the final rankings have the Midwest all over it because he advocates, right? Bears were a champion last year. They held at 17, right? Kansas City is definitely Midwest, right? And then look, CMFL. That's a CMFL runner-up. CMFL champion is the Bears. Again, the Bears, we saw the Bears resume. The Bears shellacked and played nobody, and that nobody runner-up is sitting at 18. Right? So even look at how close this is. The Bears, who were the runner-up to the Knowles, versus Kansas City, who is a runner-up to the Bears, are all the way down here together. Right? So that's what it is. So who is advocating for New York? And that's where I am with it. Again, you can disagree with me. Yeah, DC. You can disagree with me. You can. But the bottom line is, the Ravens beat number 7, maintained number 1 status. The Knowles beat number 4 and dropped to 3. The Ducks beat number 7? No. The Ducks beat number 5 and moved up to 2. Yeah. Great Plains. Yeah, Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah. Oh, could be. Could be. Gotcha. And that's how it happened. So, again, whenever Crow wakes up, whenever Duncan gets up, already had the conversations. That's just my take on it. So, I get it, and I disagree. I get it, though. People don't want to disclose that they're on the board. But if you're not willing to take the stand, especially when you have that, people are putting a lot of work into these teams. There's a lot of money invested into these teams. So to just dismiss it as you're getting mad over rankings. And keep in mind, I don't have a team. I don't have a horse in the race, right? But I do know what it's like to put in so much work and then to be able to say, hey, I'm the number 7 team in the country, and I earned that. You know, that's part of your recruiting pitch, right? We're the number 7 team in the nation. We're the number 9 team in the nation. Even teams that are lower down, they in conversations, they mention what they are ranked in the nation. And they use, especially in our area, they use the Sunshine Bowl rankings as the go-to. So, again, a little criticism ain't going to hurt. It's not going to hurt. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. And you don't even have to explain, because sometimes... Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's a fantastic question. So now, when you talk about local games, right? If a New York team comes out of the if a New York team comes out of the NEFL as the champion, then New England's champion is a New York team. So then whoever that champion is, let's say the Seminoles get through and win the NEFL, which would be hilarious, right? They're the New England champion. So everybody else in New England does not matter at that point. So at this point, it's like the Roman Empire at that particular point, right? Because the only ones that have really denied, like, being, the crown being in Brooklyn has been the New Englanders because of the shenanigans of having to chase them all the way to Miami and such. Now, totally different story. Now you can't avoid them, right? And you may actually have to play them in New York. God forbid the first AAA NEFL team that plays in Brooklyn, if they get their ass handed to them, people are gonna be flipping through those history books like, let's talk about these teams and how good they were, because you had some way of saying who you were. But when the show got put on the road, the only time you could really beat these teams is in Florida against, teams that are not really, it's not the same team as their regular season team. And that's where regional games matter, right? And I think we can agree on that as well, that you really do. The Knowles winning against Lockport, to me, was more impressive than them beating the Bombers in Florida. Based on rosters, again, you can say you had everybody, conditions, this and that. Again, with everything that goes into one of those trips, and I've done them plenty of times, you're not the same as if you are, 2 hours away from each other. We meet an hour in, and we're playing with everybody in full strength, mid-season, or like at the end of the season when everybody is at full tilt, full capacity, been practicing, but no excuses. I want to see that. So, questions before we move on, because it's now 11 o'clock. Do the rankings still want a champion because champion game, the winner goes to Florida automatically? It's a good question. Daryl, so what occurred, and it's funny because I was corrected, and then the correction ended up being completely incorrect, which was the Ravens chose first. It was Cash. Mike Cash. Big shout out to Cash, by the way. But he said that I didn't tell the truth. And then it was confirmed that I was telling the truth, which was the Ravens chose their opponent first. Whether you agree with who they chose, totally separate conversation. But they set up their game first. They had their sights set on Oklahoma. They had already done the deal with USA Bowl. That was locked in and announced. Now, whether they were going to multitask and also do the Sunshine Bowl, acknowledged, but you locked into the USA Bowl, and that's what it was. The second team that locked in was the Bombers. The Bombers locked in. In fact, it was funny because 2-4 will even say, when I was like, yo, y'all don't have a resume to deserve a natty game. He's like, we already got it. I'm like, well, if the Knowles play Lockport, then nope, we already got it. We don't got to play anybody. And teams were asking to play the Bombers. The Bombers were like, nope, we're good. Because Nugent had already done the deal and booked them for the 7 p.m. game with the NFE. That's the game that they chose, which is why, even more funny, that when all the debacle happened at the game against with the Bombers and the Knowles, like, how much could the Bombers say? Because they were the ones that chose to go to that raggedy stuff. If a team goes undefeated in EFL summer, do you feel then they have to play a champ versus champ game, even though they would have played in different states? Ooh, that's a good question. So would they have to play a champ versus champ game if they run the table in? So you still have the EFA, and the EFA will jump up to AAA, as they should, by the way. Again, just because you don't have the best team in the nation doesn't mean that you're AA, right? Bandits playing the Bears. Bandits played the Pharaohs. Demon Knights have played the Pharaohs. Demon Knights have played the Bears, right? So it's not like those teams aren't competitive, right? It's not a separate echelon of teams. So EFA being AAA and that being fixed would be step one, right? So whoever comes out of NEFL, also, whoever it is, playing the NEFL champion versus EFA champion, that is the king of the Northeast, right? Would it help to play? Ooh, no, because I left out my upstate folks. Woo! All right, so upstate, NEFL, EFA, those are the three champs, and then MLF. Those would be the four champs that I'd like to see play it out for the championship spot. So if you had Lockport, NEFL, what did I go over? Yeah, Lockport, NEFL champion. The league that Lockport, I have it right in front of me. I'm sitting here bullshitting. NFA champion, NEFL champion, EFA champion, MLF champion. As your final four in the region. And if any of those four refuse to play, they're automatically out from a national championship game. That would be the Patterson method. Patterson method would be that. Those are the 4 champs. And by the way, keep in mind, and I love the fact that let's bring that up, right? Back to the board, right? Part of my accounting up there. So, an EFL champ, NFA champ, EFA champ, and the MLF champ. Boom, 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 boom. I went off the planet. That's the regional champ right there, right? Think about where that goes from, right? That goes from South Carolina all the way to Maine and upstate, right? And here's the issue, right? Going back to my original issue. Let's talk about it. The Detroit Ravens are in the PFA. Who else in the Illinois Cowboys are in the MWUFL. Columbus Fire is in the PAFL. They're ranked number 5. See, we already have 3 leagues in the top 5, right? In all Midwest. Sheboygan is in the MWFL. So the champion, the first runner-up, the first league runner-up, which is ranked higher than a champion, by the way, is a Midwest team. Going back to, again, advocacy, right? Capital City, TP, NFA, Oklahoma City Bears are in the CMFL. But you know what? I'll leave that out because that wouldn't be a regional game because they didn't consider it a regional game when the Ravens played them. So I'll leave Oklahoma City's league out of it. Racine's the PFA. Although Racine left the PFA, and I think they went to one of the other ones. PAFL, ranked later on, and then Kansas City is CMFL. Beautiful. So PFA, MWFL, PAFL, and let's talk about it real quick. The PFA in the top 20 has 3 teams that are ranked. MWFL has the number 4 team, the number 6 team. Boom. 2. PAFL has the Fire at number 5. They have 2 teams. And the Michigan Hurricanes at number 16, right? Now, here's the thing. They have 3 champions in the Midwest, right? What other region has 3 champions? And then out of those 3 champions, 7 teams are ranked. Seven teams, 3 champs. Now, in New York, we have really, in AAA, 1 league, right? So LAL had 2 teams in it, right? Let me move over here. LAL had 2, right? Which is why, by the way, if you want to be honest, especially with the amount of teams that the LAL has, you had to play champ versus champ games. But now NEFL, they have 1 team because their number 2 team didn't even make the top 20 at all. You would have EFA. EFA is not even represented because they're considered wrongly a AA league. And that's how stupid that part is, right? And then the NFA. The NFA has Lockport, and their number 2 is not in here. What other leagues in the Northeast? NEFL, And again, you include an ECFL because they're double A last year, right? But you can't tell me that the Bulls weren't triple A, right? We talk about like the quality of teams. So now you're asking for all of these, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 champs only represented with 4 ranked teams. Right? So even like the 3 that counted as AAA last year, LAL, NEFL, and NFA, who had 3 of the top teams in the nation. Their teams, their runner-ups very rarely showed up in the standings. And overall, they have 4 ranked teams. In the 3 Midwestern leagues, they have 3 champions, 7 teams represented, and literally 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top 6 teams. Right? Does that sound right to you? 4 of the top 6 teams in the nation are all from the Midwest. Correct me where I'm wrong. All right. So that's pretty much it. Anybody that wants to comment or say anything? What up? Steph Love, you want to come on the show? Give me your thoughts. Or are you just waking up and such? You always catch it on the replay. Again, appreciate y'all. 11:15. Went a little bit overboard today, but again, been on the road and such, so we had a bunch of quick shows for the last couple. So, all right, y'all. That's just my 2 pennies in it. But again, let me finish the conversation the same way I started the conversation, which is great job to the Sunshine Bowl. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for taking the time to do the rankings. It takes a lot of time to do rankings. It takes a lot of time to go through the information. They are not doing it all willy-nilly. They're not doing it all reckless and such. They're definitely not doing any of that. And big shout out to those that are advocating for their particular teams in their region that are knowledgeable enough and have the respect of their peers enough to make sure that their teams are appropriately. Lockport is merging with Buffalo Stampede. Ooh, that should be a good one. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Big shout out to the people that are advocating for their regions, and the standings show that. So, again, not about cheating or this or that or even being upset. Whatever. If you're pointing out that people are upset at the rankings or what have you, then that means your rankings matter. So, that's some responsibility to it. I come out with rankings. Some people take it to heart. They message me, and I thank them for caring and try to address what they said as best as possible. That's pretty much it. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your week.